Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know that this video was interrupted by a bad signal while I was on family vacation in Alaska. And so I coupled together the two different segments featuring Josh Brahm in my interview with him. Josh Brahm is an awesome person with a great organization. And so, despite the kind of wonky format with the interview, I think it was a great interview and I really recommend his stuff. So, without further ado, let's jump into the interview.
Back to for Theology. This is your host, Matt Montana speaking. I'm here today with Josh Brahm from the Equal Rights Institute. And Josh is going to be reporting from his studio, and I'll just be zooming in as I'm on family vacation, and the signal's not too strong. So we'll be doing that. So Josh, he actually, his organization and himself very much helped me when I was a student at Boston College, helping to run the club there, the pro-life club. And his apologetics, his approach to relational dialogue, to treating pro-choice people like real humans, being kind and compassionate to them, while still, standing up in charity for the pro-life position, very much helped me in my own philosophical development, especially, articulating the pro-life viewpoint on this issue. And just very grateful to Josh and the Equal Rights Institute for all their work. And he's done a lot of speaking events, a lot of stuff, and you can check out his stuff more at, again, the Equal Rights Institute online in their master class on pro-life apologetics and sidewalk counseling. So, Josh, great to have you on the podcast.
Max, it is so great to be back with you. It's fun to hear your voice. I know we've done a bunch of events together, but it has been a long time. And so it is just fun that we have your show as just a kind of an excuse to be able to catch up a little bit. So it's great to be on with you.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. I'm very excited for it. And look back fondly on those days at BC, watching your stuff, but then also working with you. It was a joy to do that. So glad to be able to talk today, and talking about the pro-life position from a philosophical and scientific perspective, and then also we're 2 years after Dobbs, and so we're just going to be talking about that, and reflecting on that. So excited for that, and so I guess we'll get right into it with just the first part. So just doing pro-life work for so long and doing such great work with that. Could you talk to our audience more? I'm sure most of them are going to be from a pro-life background, but just to help them articulate the view better. What's a quick apologetic for the pro-life position from both biological or scientific, and then also a philosophical perspective?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and probably the hard part for me will be doing it quickly because I'm just so used to I sometimes do this too long. So I'm going to try to do the short version of this. And luckily, I love, and everyone should note, this is very important that you distinguish between these two categories. There's this like biological case for the unborn that can be made, and there's a philosophical case. And these are two different things. And a lot of times pro-life and pro-choice people will conflate them, and then kind of confusion can happen. So the biological side, we don't usually have to spend a lot of time debating. A lot of times you can just remind people of a few things. You know, we know that something is alive when it's growing. We know that it's human when it's got human parents. So we know we have this living human. We know we actually have a living human organism here. Its parts are working for the good of its own parts. Like everything is working kind of as it ought to be. That's not as much in debate now as it was, say, 40 years ago. Where a lot of the interesting stuff happens is when we get into philosophy land, because science can only tell us that this thing is a living human. Science can't tell us that it matters. Science can't tell us that we got to treat it well or something like does it have natural rights or something like that. And so we got to try to figure that out. And this is, easy common ground area with most pro-choice people who really do care about human rights and equal rights. They don't think that the unborn is human, so they wouldn't apply it there, but like they're going to care about this too. So it's kind of coming at this as like let's try to figure out, is there like a human rights and justice going on here? Or I have a concern about a potential civil rights or human rights and justice going on. And so can we talk about that? and they tend to be more open to that conversation. So I will try to do a short version of the way I would kind of do the way that we try to defend the philosophical view of the unborn. We kind of picked up from a wonderful philosopher, Dr. J.P. Moreland at Biola University, and my brother Tim and Steve Wagner, JFA, and I spent a lot of time trying to kind of like retool it for use on campus, and we call it the equal rights argument. So I'm sure, Max, I'm sure you can link to, there's like a 10-minute video on our YouTube channel that kind of breaks this down into multiple parts. But like every once in a while, you just have to do this in monologue form anyway. I was at University of Michigan several years ago. I'm sitting on our pool table, just kind of like trying to be as relaxed as I could be while I was talking to three incredibly pro-choice, passionate young women. And eventually, to her credit, one of them asked me, she was like, "Oh, what's your argument? Why are you here?" And I was like, "I think I could explain to you why I'm pro-life in about 2 minutes." And she said, "Go." It's okay, that kind of thing. So we'll see if I can do this in 2 minutes. But functionally, what I did, I basically said, I'm a very open-minded person. I hold most of my views with a really open hand, which also means I'm a very uncomfortable person, because my friends who are confident that they know everything is true and everything they believe is true are very comfortable. It's very nice to believe that. But when you're like me, this is an uncomfortable thing. But I'll tell you, one of the things that would be really hard for you to change my mind on is that all the humans that I can see right now on this campus, I think they should all get an equal protection from violence. Like, that just seems completely so obvious to me. Like, you could try, but it would be hard for you to change my mind. And that's a little bit of a weird view, right? Because I see a lot of differences around this campus, right? You've got people of various,
Right.
ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability status or not, like all of these different things. And yet most of us would agree that doesn't affect who you are, how your protection from violence, your right to not have violence done to you. Like, of course, those things aren't affected by that. So there's like instant common ground here, right? And so it's like, I'm thinking, well, human adults are really obvious. So if I try to think of this like kind of an equal right to life circle, like I'll literally like draw a big circle in the air, trying to figure out what goes inside the circle and what doesn't. Like, we don't want to have too many things in the circle or outside the circle. We want to treat things well. So human adults are like the obvious ones. We just agreed human adults of all kinds of varieties and the wonderful diversity that comes with the human race. All of them are in. Newborns, like,
Sure.
it seems newborns are really obvious. Most people will agree that newborns are in. There's like 4 philosophers who disagree, but beyond that, most people still agree on newborns. And then I'll throw them a curveball and say, well, what about squirrels? And well, actually, I'm still supposed to be doing some monologue form. It's very hard to do some monologue form. So I'll run them through. Okay. So human adults seem obvious. Human newborns seem
Yeah.
really obvious. But then, like, we should think about some other things. What about squirrels? Like, I can see multiple squirrels right now. Like, let's really, like, for reals here. Let's think. Should squirrels be in the circle? Because I don't think that we should just like indiscriminately hurt squirrels or kick them, like if they run past, or like, I don't know how I feel about hunting them. Like, you probably have to get pretty good justification for that. So like, all these things matter to me, but are they equal? Like, do they get an equal protection from violence? Like, I don't think so. I don't think that's the world that I live in. And so, there's a lot of different reasons
Right.
why people think that your value comes in. And I'll usually just drop the 2 most common ones, like sentience. Usually people, when they talk about sentience, they mean minimal experiences, minimal kind of awareness of the world around them. And it's very natural for us to think of sentience as being like this thing that really, really matters about you. And, newborns are sentient. So that kind of works with our intuitions there too. But then the problem is, as sentient as newborns are, you know what newborns can't do? Newborns cannot hide caches of food over a 7 square acre area and only go out to them when they're hungry. No, squirrels can do that, but newborns can't do that. So they have a squirrel problem. Suddenly, like, squirrels would be in, and that really doesn't line up with my intuitions.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes, of course, then there's a more advanced version of this that will come up, which is self-awareness. And then we just have a newborn problem because newborns aren't self-aware. until well after birth. It depends on which definition of self-awareness, but we're talking 3, 6 months, maybe more like a year to 18 months if you're really talking about what philosophers usually talk about. And so we have a problem here. We either have squirrel problems or newborn problems, and here's what I think it is in the end. I think it's something like having human nature. Is something like having a human nature that makes sense of like all these intuitions that we have. It seems obvious that adults are in. It's obvious that newborns are in. It's obvious that squirrels are not in. So like of all the different things I thought about, human nature seems to be the thing that, or something like it, is the thing that makes the most sense. And I will always end my, at this point, what, 6 minutes or whatever, I'll end it with this, is notice this is not a religious argument. And it's also not an emotional argument. I am not pro-life for emotional reasons. I do not get the warm fuzzies when I look at a picture of a zygote. It doesn't do anything for me. It looks like a fuzzy orange to me. Like I said, my heart really actually goes to the woman, especially a woman in an unplanned, like a crisis kind of a pregnancy, maybe as a result of assault or some at least really difficult circumstances. That's where my heart goes to. So I'm not pro-life for emotional religious reasons. I'm pro-life because it's the most rational conclusion I can come to. Because I'm not starting with what did my parents teach me or what was my pastor think. I'm starting with this human equality. It's like the most obvious thing I know. This is the metaphysical basement I'm starting from, and I'm reasoning from there. And I just have not yet heard a good reason to discriminate against this one group of humans and not all of the others. And frankly, in the long, sad history of the human race, every time in the past that we have drawn a circle around a group of humans and said they are different, they are other, really, really bad things have happened. And I think maybe we're doing that again. That's basically how I make the argument. And that was a long monologue. So, Max, I'm just going to let you jump back in.
All right. Yeah, no, that's awesome, Josh. I think that's perfect, and that just very much shows what we're learning at BC from you, and the reasonableness of the position. You know, it's both just philosophically or scientifically the most rational there, but I mean that's not really anything to disagree about. It's not really interesting. But then philosophically too, I mean, just like knowing that you're not going to include squirrels in the same plane as humans, even though they're valuable, and then you're not going to throw out newborns. Just who does that? Except a few people. So it's just like knowing that, these kind of like basic common sense truths are real, and then just kind of putting the pieces together that makes perfect sense to me, and it's gonna be good for our viewers too.
I'll just emphasize, as we kind of transition, there are a lot of different ways to defend the humanity or the personhood of the unborn, and some of them work better than others. Right. And this is kind of a novel approach that we've tried, and we've just not found anything that works better. It became kind of what we started calling the most undervalued pro-life argument, because there's like, this is something that is working so often. Like every outreach, we're hearing multiple stories from our students saying, I saw someone change their mind today because of this argument, but so many people don't know it yet. And it's frankly not the easiest argument to master either, as you well know from personal experience. So I just want to kind of encourage people, like, I would happily hand you an easier, like a soundbite. If there was some soundbite that was just like this rock solid silver bullet that would make everyone pro-life, I'd be so happy to train people to memorize the thing. But instead, what we're finding is that young people, they care about equality more than anything. And the most effective way to help them to actually rethink their worldview on this is to kind of force them to make a choice. Are they going to be a pro-choice person, or are they going to be a pro-equality person? And most young people care more about being pro-equality people and seeing themselves as pro-equality people than they care about being a pro-choice person. So if you can really force them to wrestle with that, I think that is why we are seeing people change their mind from pro-choice to pro-life in front of us a lot more often than we had in the past. Of course, that's still going to be the exception. Most people cannot change their mind in one day, no matter who they're talking to. But seeing that happen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times have given us a lot of anecdotal evidence that there are some things that are working well with this argument with Gen Z psychologically in a way that some of the things that we tried in the past just weren't connecting anymore.
Okay, great. Thanks, Josh. We're back to film the rest of this interview. And so, Josh, I
Great
wanted
to
to
be
ask
back.
you. Excellent. Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to ask you what the best pro-choice argument is, and why does it not convince you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the best pro-choice arguments concede what pro-lifers are usually talking about, at least for sake of argument. And these would be bodily autonomy arguments. Like, there's a whole interesting category of pro-choice arguments that a lot of times pro-lifers, I think, don't fully like. They understand a kind of lame straw man version of it, but they often maybe don't understand the more interesting, nuanced versions that, like, philosophers like Joseph Thompson and David Boone and people like that would use. But these ideas that, like, even if the baby is, if it is a baby, even if it's a valuable baby person like you and I, it's the same moral status, that a woman should still have the right to have an abortion because it would be too much of a violation of her bodily autonomy or bodily integrity for the government to be able to control, her bodily autonomy to the level that we would control whether or not she can choose to have an abortion or not, which is a really interesting kind of other direction to go. And we have so many thoughts on this. There's a lot of reasons why I think it's more persuasive than pro-lifers think, and yet I think it ultimately does fail. We have a whole landing page on resources on this. So I just want to say, if I basically set up, like, if I, as the scary trap that I'm not going to be able to completely, like, deal with, just know, if you go to ecorightsinstitute.com/bodily rights, we have a landing page. This was Monica Snyder's idea at Secular Pro-Life. She's like, you need to make a landing page with all of your bodily rights stuff. We'll link to it all the time. And so we have a thing, but I'll tell you, one of the things that I have found to be the most helpful, especially with, kind of the younger generation, is focusing on the issue of kind of direct violence. This is a newer, a more recent direction for us as an organization, as far as like the last several years. But we've been using this analogy that we've found to be really helpful with people in the conversations that are happening right now, where we kind of talk about this idea of like of a kid on a boat. Because a lot of times I think the difference between pro-life and pro-choice people is that we think of pregnancy differently. And so, for sake of argument, because there's a lot of times where you have several options in a situation, where you can help someone or not help some. You can choose to not help someone, or you can choose to help someone. And we think of that like pregnancy. And so if I, Josh Brahm, asked you, Montana, not on camera, for a kidney donation. I've got a kidney issue, and I'm asking you, hey, if for some reason I found out that you're a match, probably the same way that the Society of Music Lovers figured out that the violinist was a match. We've figured out some way. And so that's an inside joke for the philosophy nerds. I'm not even going to explain it. We're just moving on.
Yeah,
And so I've asked
I
you
got
for a
you.
kidney, and you at this point have three options. You can choose to help me by offering your kidney. That was a really nice thing. Philosophers would call this a supererogatory act. It's above and beyond the call of duty. It'd be really, really nice, but you don't have to. You're not morally obligated to. So you could help me. You could also just say no. You could say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I choose to keep both of my kidneys. I really want to have both of them. Or you could directly kill me. You could be like, I don't want, this, pro-life guy that I respect to know that I'm not going to give him my kidney. I'd just rather he be dead, And so, you hunt me down, and, I feel like, looking at us, you could take me in a fight. So let's just say, like, you directly kill me. That's a third option. Now, these are three distinct options, but a lot of people think of pregnancy more like the way the violinist story, kind of works with pregnancy, where they think of it as like you either can choose to help or you can choose not to help. So they think of it more like, I think pregnancy is like being on a boat. Let's say you take a boat out on a ride for an hour, and you're just hanging, you're just vibing. And then you realize that there is this 8-year-old boy hiding in, like, the closet of your boat because, he's at the dock. He's kind of a dumb kid. He was playing hide and seek with, with a bunch of other, his family. And he is the champion. He is the hide and seek champion. He wins, but he is now an hour, away. And so it's like, oh my gosh. So you have several options here. You can either help him by taking him back to shore and connecting him with his family, or at least like authorities who can connect him with his family, whatever. Or you can throw him overboard. There's not like a neutral, I'm just gonna like not help option. It's help or kill, basically. And like I've heard one person kind of try to get out of there, like, well, maybe he could swim to shore. Like, no, no, no. This isn't, the end of Jaws, where they can like doggy paddle with some buoys to shore, like, his way over. No, no, no. This kid's gonna drown, or he's shark food. And so like,
Yeah.
it's like you can't get out of it that way. And so we're just saying, like, I don't think that we are always obligated to help people. I don't think in every situation that we should force people to help people, even if you could help. I don't think that we should force people to do blood donations, even. Like, I do think that there is respect that we ought to have for bodily autonomy. But I think that there are at least some things that you can't do. And if I'm the guy on the boat who unfortunately now is in the situation where I can either help or kill, that there's not this kind of, faux neutral not help option. If there's not that option, I think at that point I am now obligated to help. I would be obligated to feed this kid, to even give him a blood donation. I think if I was the only one able to help him for, like, let's say a few days or something like that on the way to get back to his parents' house. Like, we wouldn't typically tell people that you're obligated to do those things, but if your only other option is to kill someone, is to intentionally directly kill someone, I think we are not allowed to do that, outside of, obviously crazy situations like self-defense, which I don't think pregnancy is like one. So to sum up, I know there's a long answer, and this is only like one kind of thought on it, but this is something that we've been thinking about a lot lately, is that for a lot of pro-choice people, their foundation, what they care about the most is the bodily autonomy thing. They feel like this is a crazy government Handmaid's Tale kind of fixing of the problem. And so they're freaking out, and they think that that having an abortion is just like not helping someone. And we're saying, no, having an abortion directly kills someone, even chemical abortion. So the abortion pills, even those directly, intentionally kill people with a different procedure. So we think like that's what we need to be figuring out. Is that wrong in that situation? Because I'm going to find a lot of common ground on bodily autonomy, but I don't think that we're allowed to kill people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful, Josh. That's a great answer. And hey, I got you, man. If you need a blood donation or a kidney donation, just let me know.
Sounds good. We have it. It's recorded. I'm definitely a
Here we go.
legally binding, Max. You better be careful now. It's very kind.
Hey, yeah, exactly right. That'll be Houston court now. But yeah, no, it's a great answer. And yeah, no, I think that is a popular argument, the bodily autonomy. And yeah, I think it just misunderstands kind of like what it means to be human, kind of what you're getting at there. And yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. It's never right to kill anyone else. And even philosophers like Kant, they build that on, you don't have to be a Christian to believe that. I think it's just a very universal thing. And yes, that's a great answer. Thanks for that. And yeah, so we're about 2 years after Dobbs, right?
Yep.
So this ended, as you know, the federal bench's prohibition of pro-life states legislating what are in reality the most effective pro-life laws, for their citizens. People know the heartbeat bill pretty well now, including that one. So broadly, what has happened since then in the political arena, as well as in broader American culture, in public discourse about abortion?
Yeah, so I feel like everything's kind of changed. Everything got harder really quickly. So let's start with culturally. Culturally, there's been a huge backlash because, and I think this is something that we see this pattern historically, where sometimes, we think of laws versus culture. Which one kind of changes first? Does culture change and then the laws come with it, or do laws have to change and culture come with it? It's like sometimes people, poli-sci people will kind of debate this, and I think, well, it's either or. It kind of depends on the situation. I think Martin Luther King Jr. made a really reasonable point in his letter from a Birmingham jail about just like, I'm not trying to force the white man to love me. I just want him to not be able to lynch me. Like, that's a very reasonable, I just want to get at least some legal protection, regardless of how much he likes me kind of a thing. But then sometimes that doesn't work out that way. So if you think of prohibition, is a situation where laws went way before culture, because at the time in the early 1900s, for a bunch of historical reasons, there was a lot of a lot of kind of sentiment against hard liquor because of the results that it was having. But then when the legislation happened, they also banned beer and wine, and which was way further than what kind of where culturally people were at. And so there was a rejection of that. It didn't last very long. And so culture and laws tend to move each other. They kind of go, if sometimes in front of the other, sometimes in front of the other. But when one goes way in front of the other, then you get kind of more upheaval, or it might be harder to last, or things like that. And so our culture was, unfortunately, even though we were, decades from Roe versus Wade, having been passed, culturally, we were still not in a place where most of the country was open to the idea of the majority of first trimester abortions being banned anywhere. There's a lot of general kind of public, sentiment that we should be banning later abortions, like after 16 or 20 weeks or something like that. There's a lot of, general agreement that maybe there's some reasons that people have abortions that ought not to be, at least like sex selection and coercive abortions and things like that. But you're not going to find, a ton of people in the culture that are for banning all first trimester abortions. Even in the cases of rape and incest and human trafficking, and
Right.
just an exception for life of the mother. Like, there's just not a lot of those. And so pro-choice people have become less apathetic. It's way easier to have conversations with people now, in the sense that I'm not trying to convince them to care about this, because, and if you go back to like the archives, you can listen to me telling people, I don't know what to tell you about apathetic people. I mean, here's a couple of things I try, but it's really, really hard, so we don't deal with that so much now. No one's apathetic about it,
Yeah.
but they're also way more
Yeah.
angry and scared. It's like an animal caught in the back of a trap. They're really, really worried about what's happening for, depending on the state that they're in. If they're in a super red state, then they're worried about what's happening right now. If they're in kind of a purple state, they're worried about what's going to happen in the future, maybe to them. And even if they're in a blue state, they're really worried about all of their friends and family who are in these other places where abortion bans are happening. And so culturally, I think pro-lifers are, to some, are more like pariah than have been in probably 40 years. I don't think the pro-choice side was that worried about losing access to abortion rights substantively anywhere in the country this soon. And frankly, the pro-life movement didn't either. Most pro-life leaders, including me, did not think that Roe v. Wade would be overturned anytime in at least the next 10 or 20 years. And so I don't know who came up with the analogy, but there is some truth to it, that the pro-life movement's a little bit like the dog that was always chasing the mail truck and then finally got it. And I was like, what now? It's like there are major problems that used to be like
Right.
academic issues and are now very practical problems. How do you write crystal clear life of the mother exceptions in legislation so that you don't have, situations where a woman has tragically a really, really dangerous pregnancy situation that needs to be, dealt with soon? You can't have a hospital ethics committee take a day to decide what they're going to do, because she will probably die that soon. So it's like, we haven't had to figure out how to make this work. There's hospitals and pro-life groups trying to figure it out. We've been thinking about it really seriously for a year and a half with 4 philosophers, and we're still trying to work on it. It's really, really hard. Medical stuff is so case by case that it's hard to figure out how to write kind of all-encompassing language. But I know that every time a story happens of a woman having a tragic pregnancy situation come up, the pro-life movement ends up seeming like the evil, the really bad guys that are just like, don't care about her, don't care about what's going on for her family, and are forcing her to travel out of state or whatever is going on. It doesn't mean that I think, all of these stories are people who have situations where they are justified to have an abortion, but unfortunately, that is kind of the story in, I think, the consciousness right now. Is, in fact, I just read a New York Times article this morning about about how there's this kind of like really new kind of, and I don't know, I haven't done enough digging into their research to take this with a grain of salt, but I think there's at least some research here that you've got new kind of voices that are very passionate about this topic, and some of those include people who have had really tragic pregnancy situations in the past, who are concerned about what that would mean for the future. And so here is something that the pro-life movement could do right now. Like, there are difficult problems for us to be figuring out, and we should try to solve them as quickly as we can. And we're working on that. And we should be working on that. But here, there are things that we could do right now that we are not. I think that we could do a better job, and I'm going to speak specifically to the religious pro-life community. We love the secular pro-life community. We are dear friends with, I already name dropped Monica is in this interview already. Like, Monica, I love secular pro-life. But I'm going to speak specifically to my religious pro-life friends and say that our churches could do a way better job of practically helping the people, both inside and outside of our churches, who have unplanned pregnancy situations. So let's start outside the church, and then we'll come in. Because the outside the church, I've been a part of multiple church plants now. Sorry, this is a long answer, but you've got me going, and so this is a
go for it. Yeah.
I've been a part of multiple church plants where, and I just imagine every wonderful church planting pastor has probably said something like this to like their kind of core group of people that they're going to work with. We're going to be in the neighborhoods, guys. We're going to get outside of our 4 walls. We're going to be the hands and feet of Jesus to the broken people around here, and really mean it. But then you start a church, and that's hard. And keeping just a church going, keeping your flock healthy, and managing the people, the volunteers, all of this stuff. I've been in worship ministry for about 3 decades now. Like, I'm part of the sausage making machine behind it, kind of, and I don't mean that in a I know it sounds negative, but like all of the people that are like every Sunday for us, a lot of times is trying to serve, the people and work. That's kind of where the direction that I'm coming from. And so I want to be like, how can we get back to that goal that was so good in the beginning, but just understandably can sometimes get buried by all of the work of ministry. And I don't actually know yet what that really looks like. When sometimes I get to go out and do talks, and I will actually get a group of like pastors together and do a brainstorm session with them. Where like, I'll share some ideas, but then I'm like, open the floor, like, help me understand. I will tell you one. One of my pastors actually heard about this. I need to learn more about it. But it's a really cool idea. It might be enough to get people like thinking, like, your church could do this. There's a couple of churches on the East Coast that are doing this thing that they're calling micro churches. And what they don't mean by that is like home churches or small groups. Right. What they mean is they are targeting apartment complexes, which apparently there is some statistics that indicate that this is the most unchurched kind of place that you could live in the country. That's some in the 80, 90% unchurched rate in apartment complexes. And so it's like, so there's a few churches that have sort of planted a family or two in an apartment building, and their job is not to, convince a bunch of people to come back to their church and become volunteers and tithers and be kind of growing there under that kind of controlled environment. But it's more like, hey, just go be Jesus there. Get in the community. I've got a very left-wing friend who is a beautiful example of this, who in her apartment, she is known for being the one to go to if you have a kind of a crisis pregnancy situation. Like, it's kind of like, hey, like, regardless whether they're pro-choice or pro-life, it's just like, hey, if you're needing actual practical help, go talk to Lauren in 3B, kind of a thing. Like she kind of has like this micro pregnancy center thing happening. And that's beautiful. There's something beautiful about that. And I don't know how that's going to work. And I don't think these churches do either. But we've got to figure out how to get out there and be more practical in helping the people around us that really need help. And then quickly, let me say, inside the church, the best research that I know of on the topic of abortions that happen within the church is this. Is a stat. There's a whole study, but the most staggering statistic from it is that 36% of women having abortions, 36% of women having abortions were going to church the month they had the abortion. They were going to church on at least a monthly basis. And I think that's really important for the pro-life movement to reckon with, or at least the pro-life church, the church, capital C church, to reckon with, because a lot of times you hear pro-lifers talk about, like, quote unquote Christians having abortions as if like they're like, these are just like the cultural Catholics who just come like on Easter and Christmas, like they grew up Catholic, but maybe like they're not like super serious about it. And there's those in the Protestant church too. But they don't think of it as being like our brothers and sisters within the church, you know what I mean? But they are. These are people sitting in our pews. And that raises a major question, because this is a different kind of abortion. These are people who know Imago Dei and what abortion means, at least to some extent. And so what is driving that? And I think part of what's driving that is the stigma. It is a lot more stigma attached to being an unwed pregnant person in the church than outside the church, because of the moral question here. No one cares on a college campus if you're pregnant or what, because no one would think that that's wrong to do anything there. Whereas if you're at church that thinks that all premarital sex is wrong, then naturally this is going to be scary. And so my thought is this. I think churches, generally speaking, in the last 20 years, have become much more gracious things, which is, I think, a really good direction, at least for like the churches. And I mean North America. I don't know what the trends are outside of that, but in North America, I have actually talked to women who have had the experience decades ago of being taken to the front of the church to apologize for the sin of premarital sex because he's pregnant. Meanwhile, her boyfriend is in the pews and no one's saying anything to him. Like that, those kinds of situations. But that doesn't really happen anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, right.
But people don't know that. No one knows how their church handles this issue, because we typically handle this issue in private. Like that would be typically the most appropriate way to handle something like this. You don't just like go in front of church and talk about all the stuff going on, with all the people. That'd be like really inappropriate. And so then there's an epistemological problem. They don't know, and they think that their church might be one of the judgy ones, or ones where it's going to be really bad. And so out of fear, they abort. And so what if pastors a couple of times a year, just for a few minutes, made an announcement? It doesn't have to be a sermon, but just as like, regardless of what every other church in the country does when this situation happens, I'm going to tell you as our shepherd, not the shepherd, but as the shepherd of this particular flock, how we will handle this moving forward when this happens. We love babies. We love life. We believe that humans are made in God's image. And so we are going to celebrate life in your womb, just like we celebrate life in other people's wombs here. We're not going to gossip. We're not going to, if you're in the youth group, we're not going to let the youth group be, making your life miserable. We are going to we're going to throw you a baby shower. We will deal with the sin issue in private in whatever way is appropriate, but in public, we're going to celebrate life. And I believe, and I've been told that, that when churches did this, there are women who choose to have abortions who would not, if they were in a situation where they felt like their church was one of the safe places to be in this situation. So there's a few action steps that we can take right now. We can talk to our pastors. And if you're interested in that kind of idea, if you go to equalrightsinstitute.com/pastor, we've got an article and a video about this kind of concept, this pastor pledge kind of concept, because I'm trying to get pastors to pledge to do this. I'm going to make a map of churches with pins. Here's all these churches that have like pledged to do this kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That is something that we can do right now.
Josh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, no, I think that's such an important point. Yeah, just like being able to be that safe haven. I mean, that's all we're all wanting to. We all want that place where we can be known and loved. I mean, even if there's non-Christians watching this, I mean, everyone knows that great feeling waking up on Christmas, Thanksgiving, where you're just like at home, at peace, and a place like that, that has to be built through our words, our rational capabilities. That's our most important aspect. So actually, like saying it, and then actually doing it. Yeah, I think that would be great. So
that was such a more artful way of saying what I was trying to say. That was beautiful.
No,
well done. That was good. I love that. That was good.
No, I don't know if it was, but I got to hear what you say first, and then I have a shorter amount of time to say it, so that's why. But that's great, and so okay, I guess to build off that, so what in your view is good in the broader pro-life movement's response to Dobbs, or if you want to talk about like one particular subgroup, that's wherever you want to go with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Pregnancy centers have been doing, have a lot of pregnancy centers have been doing a really, really great job post-Dobbs, which is not an easy thing. Because kind of everything changed. I don't know how many phases of the pro-life movement we should think of historically happened before Dobbs, but some people think of there being as kind of like two. This is definitely phase 3, or phase whatever. It's almost everything is different now. And so pregnancy centers have been having to pivot in certain ways. And so, for example, there are some pregnancy centers where a kind of a common strategy was to try to, when you have someone really stressed out, then you want them to be, people don't make very good decisions when they're really stressed out and anxious. And so you want to try to help people to calm down, slow down. Let's think through this, calmly. Let's think through all the options with someone, loving, like that kind of a thing. I was kind of like, let's like help slow this person down. And that doesn't work so much anymore if you are in a redder state in a pregnancy center, because you're talking to women who literally like they've got to figure it out today. They don't have a whole lot of time. They don't have the time to slow down. And so if you can get them in there for, a pregnancy test or something like that, like you need to be trying to get the ultrasound to happen that day. That is not how it's always been done. Some pregnancy centers have done that, but not always. And sometimes that is to help slow people down. It's like, we have to help her figure this out right now, because we need to understand that if she does not feel like she has the answers that she needs or the help that she needs or the resources that she needs or whatever, then her next call is Planned Parenthood. And so I have been someone who sometimes gets to do pregnancy center banquets, and as a result gets to talk a lot with pregnancy center directors and tour pregnancy centers. I've had a chance to get to know some really amazing pregnancy center directors that have pivoted really well or are pivoting really well to what are the needs in their community in a kind of a post-Dobbs era. That is one. I'll give one more. We were a little bit involved with this, but we're not the only ones involved with this. But a large segment of the pro-life community has signed a joint statement that I think sends a really helpful message to the world. It was written primarily by 4 people: Professor Charlie Camosi, Jonathan Van Maren at Canada CBR, Eric Scheidler at Pro-Life Action League, and myself. And basically the joint statement functionally says that it's a really bad thing that it is way more expensive to have a baby in America than to kill one, and that there are a lot of women, and more research is being done on this by not just like pro-lifers, but like, people who are just like, studying, there are feminists that are studying this. It is not good that there is so much more expensive in America to have a baby than it is to kill one. And there are a lot of people that are there are a lot of women that are having unwanted abortions. That is a phrase that we are seeing and using more often. And what we mean by that is they are women who are, it's not that they're being necessarily coerced by her boyfriend or her husband or parents or something like that. That does happen a lot. But in this case, we're talking about people who are feeling more coerced by their circumstances, that are like, I literally do not think that I can make ends meet if this happens, or something like along those lines. And so it is a whole political debate, economical debate of like how we should help people in need. And different people have different views on that. And we're just suggesting that there are probably some policies that most people on the right and most people on the left can find common ground on that would really, really help people to not feel forced into having a quote unquote unwanted abortion. So if people are interested in signing that statement, or at least learning more about kind of what we're saying and what kind of things that we're recommending, they can go to postrofuture.com. But we were really pleasantly surprised. A massive amount of pro-life leaders have signed that at the nationals, the state level, local level. Of course, a lot of just pro-life people. And I think that's helped send it's helping to send a message. I would like more people to sign. I like to be more well known. But we want to help send a message that the pro-life movement is not just here to like take away your rights. We want to help. If we are taking away something that you have thought of as a right, then how can we help? How can we help with this transition? Not just in word, but in deed. Let's let our actions speak louder than words. Love is an action. There's a bunch of different ways to say this, but we could all do better at that. And that is something we should be focusing a lot on right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'll definitely link it in the show notes. The petition there. That's amazing. And yeah, I think there are a lot of things. I sort of noticed that in my own career in the pro-life movement, where there's a lot of things that you can find common ground on with pro-choice people, especially related to policy, especially related to not just like abandoning someone. When they're in a tough situation and they need help. And, we know that material help always points to helping, people's emotional state. If they believe in a soul, helping their soul too, and vice versa. And so, there's just many things like we're needy creatures, but we're also able to, express great love through stuff like the petition. Yeah. So I'll definitely link that, Josh. And that sounds great, man. Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. Okay, great. So, kind of building off that, where do you think though the pro-life movement's response could improve, if you had to say, and then what is ERI doing to help with that?
Yeah, boy. So there's a lot in there, and we're still trying to figure that out. But one or two thoughts. So probably the biggest thing is and we've written about this, and we've done podcasts about this, but a lot of the pro-life movement uses the word abortion differently than a lot of the rest of the world. And so there's an equivocation problem happening. Equivocation is when two people are using the same word, but they mean it different ways. And so this is like a really easy way to kind of miscommunicate. It's like, it's easier to have happen even if you're doing your best, and to like strawman someone. It's pretty easy to work around, like not strawman. So if you ask enough questions. But this is one of those, like, we just miss each other. Our brains are wired so differently. And so we just kind of miss each other. And so a lot of the pro-life movement has a very narrow definition of abortion that functionally would define abortions as elective procedures. Like all of the abortions that happen for socioeconomic reasons, even reasons for hard cases like rape and incest would fall within the definition of an elective abortion. But then if a woman has a tubal pregnancy and we need to intervene, which even the Catholic Church agrees it is morally, it's allowed for us to intervene there as long as we intervene in as indirect a way as we can. So there's a double effect reasoning, rubric going on here, and we remove the fallopian tube that the child is in, or at least that section of it, and with the foreknowledge that it's not going to survive. But that's not the intent. The intention is to save her life because it's the only way to save her life. Tragically, we don't have a way to, like Star Trek, beam the baby from the wrong place to the right place. It'd be really great if we could even do that surgically, but that's not possible right now with today's technology. And so that's a tragic situation. And so here's this thing that happens now is you have a lot of pro-lifers that are feeling, I think, kind of defensive, or maybe wanting to be strong in their beliefs, make sure that they're expressing their views strongly about abortion in spite of the kind of the cultural milieu that we find ourselves in, and they will use phrases like "I'm 100% pro-lifer," "I am a no exceptions pro-lifer," "I'm 100% pro-life," "I'm opposed to all exceptions," and what they mean by that is that they're against all of the elective abortions. They basically mean that they are against writing in exceptions for rape and incest in pro-life bills. Is a lot of what is being said there, and issues like Down syndrome and things like that. But the rest of the world, or a lot of the rest of the world, uses the word abortion more broadly than we do. Spontaneous abortion used to be a very common phrase used to describe a miscarriage. It is still used to describe miscarriages sometimes. The word abortion gets used sometimes in procedures where where a miscarriage has happened, and tragically the baby has not been delivered. The baby's body has not been delivered, and we have to go in and functionally do the same procedure as we do in some first trimester abortions, because if we leave this dead body there, it's going to decay, and there's going to be sepsis, and it's going to be it's a very dangerous thing. We have to remove this baby. But it's a completely morally different situation. I know pro-life leaders whose wives have had to have that procedure. Like, imagine that. And they have to understand this is not an abortion in the way that, like, in what we're fighting. This is not an elective abortion. This is not, choosing to directly kill someone because of socioeconomic circumstances, even really, really hard circumstances. This is more like a self-defense situation where, pro-lifers that are saying, I am against all exceptions, I am 100% pro-life, they sound like they are functionally saying that when we write abortion bans, that we should ban all abortions, even in the case of life of the mother. That women who are unfortunate enough to have a tubal pregnancy need to commit suicide via pregnancy because we call that an abortion. There's almost no pro-life people that actually think like that. You understand? But it's what we sound like because we're using language that we're used to, that we use internally, and the other side isn't understanding that. And to be fair, also, I've just because I do some, there are things I want to see the pro-life side get better at, but I will say there is a lot of deception in this area coming from the pro-choice side too. There are pro-choice OBGYNs on TikTok that make very effective viral videos about how dangerous the pro-life movement is making things for women. And there are cases where it's like they have to be knowingly lying. Not all the time, but there are times when they're knowingly lying and making things sound much worse or scarier or dangerous than they are in order to get certain political outcomes to happen, at least like in that state. And so we're fighting a lot of that too. That makes things really difficult. But we need to be really careful how we use them. So the easy solution is this. If you're pro-life and you're talking about the exceptions that you have, just use the phrase elective abortion instead of saying abortion. Just say elective. Just say if you're opposed to rape and incest exceptions on bans on elective abortions, then just make that really clear. You're talking about elective abortions. And just say, if, like me and most pro-life people, you believe that it is okay for a woman with a tubal pregnancy to intervene and for us to save that woman's life, even though we know that the baby's not going to be able to be saved too. We can't save them both, so we're going to save the one, this one that we can. If you're okay with that, you need to just basically make that part of your pro-life elevator pitch. Like every time you explain your what is your pro-life view, and we have a blog post that Max can link to if he wants, with kind of here's
Sure.
a really great 30-second version of the pro-life position, which frankly we used to have one that I had written, but we replaced it with something better from one of our pro-life friends in Ireland who just wrote something beautiful and amazing. It was like, never mind, we're replacing my thing with that. It's way better. So find this wonderful thing, but we need to basically just make a part of it now that you just got to say, and if her life is at risk, if continuing this pregnancy is something that's going to put her life at grave risk, then of course I think that's a tragic situation, and she should be allowed, whatever you want to call this word, whether you want to call it an abortion or a medical procedure to save another life or whatever, just be really clear that you are okay with that. Because what the rest of the pro-choice world and even kind of neutral world is being told by, even in this New York Times article that I read this morning that you could link to also, they're basically saying that pro-lifers are endangering all of these people, that all the things that we're doing are going to cause all of these women to die, and so we need to basically push back against that. And it's there are nuanced ways to talk about this. There are ways to kind of talk about, say, okay, of course, if she has a tubal pregnancy, that's a completely different situation. I'm talking more, when I talk about abortions being banned, I'm thinking of clearer cases what if the baby is 20 weeks old and the only reason we're having the abortion is because we just found out that the baby's gender is female? Can we agree that's wrong? That and if so, then let's work towards the middle. Let's figure out what are the boundaries of our views and try to figure out what makes most sense. We can do that, but let's just be really clear about the language that we're using, because there's such an easy equivocation. The last thing I will say, and I'll just say this really, really quick, and I'm not going to go into detail, if nothing else, because I don't want to, is I will just say that pro-life people this year in particular need to be really, really careful about the way that they talk about politics and the political candidates that they support. Even if they support political candidates for pragmatic reasons, for pro-life reasons, they should be as clear as they can, find as much common ground as they can with the people in their communities who have a really hard time with that. Because most pro-lifers I know that have supported President Trump have supported him plugging their nose. It's not because they actually like the way that he talks about women, for example. It's in spite of that. And so as much common ground as you can find with people, if you're supporting any politician like that can kind of give pro-lifers a bad name, is just make really clear what it is you're supporting and what it is that you're not. I want the pro-life movement to be known as a much more loving, caring thing than Donald Trump will ever be known for. So, of course, we're not endorsing. We're a 501c3. We don't make endorsements. I'm just saying, whoever you're going to vote for, and however you choose to do that, it would be good for you to be communicating the common ground that you genuinely have, if you have it, with your friends who would struggle with that. And that would help you to help people better understand why there are still pro-life people supporting that guy.
That's awesome, Josh. Yeah. That's I think with your last point, I usually just, whenever XYZ 2020, 2024 elections come up, I'm like, I'll pivot it to the pro-life issue very quickly, and I'll just be like, and so I mean like that, I mean that, you talk about the politicians too sometimes, but I think also it's a great opportunity just to talk about, where do you stand on abortion, but doing it in a prudent way. And so that's great. And you even mentioned like double effect too. And so even just to many people, there's a thing for this, and a real philosophical foundation for it, and scientific too. And so no, Yeah. So I think some pro-lifers can go overboard or just not make the distinctions that are important to make. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. So yeah, just I guess with the last thing here, any final thoughts? And feel free to, talk about ERI more and the work you guys are doing over there. Yeah, and just what you guys have coming in terms of speaking events, projects. Yeah, just lay it all out there if you want
Yeah,
to.
thanks.
Floor
Well,
is
I guess
yours.
I can kind of finish answering your last question because you also asked what we're doing about that, and so I'll say, we've
Oh yeah.
been talking about this for years. I did a podcast with the Dank Pro Life Memes guy. I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago, I think, kind of talking about this issue.
Oh yeah, I love that guy. Okay,
Then
I love that.
Elijah Thompson, one of my favorite pro life dudes, and he is a pro life dude. That guy, he's awesome. So we are trying to help our colleagues in the pro life movement to see the problem that we believe that we are seeing. We've had limited success with that, but to be fair, there's still a lot of kind of relationship building that can be done, but we are trying behind the scenes to help the pro-life movement to do a better job with this and to commit fewer unforced errors. To use a sports
Sure.
term, we do a lot of unforced errors right now, so we're trying to help. We don't have a ton of influence with a lot of pro-life leaders, and so we're kind of doing the best that we can. But if nothing else, we can try to train our people, the people that we're training who tend to be, age 45 and younger more often than not, and at least how to avoid some of the mistakes that we've had to learn from in the past, that I've made and had to learn from in the past. How can we do this better? How do we just need to figure out how to do things differently just because we're in a post-Roe situation? And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about that here at Equal Rights Institute. We are also finishing up a course that I've been working on for a couple of years, that we've been working on for a few years, that's primarily designed for like religious high schools, like Catholic and Christian like high schools. We've with teaching rubrics and videos and all the things, group activities and things. We're hoping that we're going to be getting that done, finished in the next few months. Of course, we're doing a lot of speaking and consulting and writing. We're getting ready to relaunch our podcast. We kind of took a break from podcasting for about a year because of the course that we were working on, and so I am in the process, and hopefully the next month or two, on relaunching kind of a new, kind of less formal version of our podcast that we're like our staff's going to be way more involved, which I'm really looking forward to because our staff meetings are a blast. We have very different kind of personalities on our staff. And I'm just like, I want more people to be able to
Oh really?
experience, because, we don't all
Yeah.
think the same way. And so
Okay.
and that's intentional. We intentionally hire people who think differently to some extent. And so people can hear kind of the differences between Andrew Cake versus Emily versus me, and it'll be really good. So those are a few of the things going on. I will just end by saying,
Awesome.
we could use more financial support. And so if there are people hearing this that are like excited about the work that we're doing here, we're not good at marketing. We're well-known things in the pro-life, a well-known organization in the pro-life movement.
You-
So if this is the kind of thing that you'd be excited about, we could definitely, and I mean, I know this is kind of every nonprofit person says this, but we could definitely use more support. We have some really cool ideas on ways that we could help the pro-life movement really quickly that just aren't happening because of lack of people and funding. And so if there's anyone out there that this is calling to you, I would love to have a personal conversation with you. You can reach out to us, and I'd love to connect with you and answer any questions that you have about what we're doing. So you can find all of that at equalrightsinstitute.com.
That's awesome, Josh. Yeah, I just want to endorse Josh's work, amazing work and organization for my listeners. And yeah, if any of my listeners, maybe you don't have a ton of money or something like that, but you know someone who does and is interested in this kind of thing, and yeah, definitely send this podcast to them. Send them Josh's homework at ERI, and I think you guys have like a really cool video on the equal rights argument, which the
Yeah.
organization is named after, through some.
Yeah, we partnered with CareNet on
Okay.
that. They
Yeah, I
came to
love
us
that
and
video.
said they wanted to make kind of a PragerU style video, and so we wrote it and I performed it, but they did like all the like kind of the animations. So they kind of made this like PragerU video that we've got on our. It was a good kind of like 9-minute summary of the equal rights argument, which is probably something worth people watching like 3 times. So until you can say it, until you can do it,
Yes.
master it, you need to watch this more times.
Absolutely. Yeah. Repetition's key. And yeah, no, I love that video and the whole course that ERI does.
Thanks.
So anyway, yeah, that sounds great, Josh. I'll link a bunch of those things in the show notes. I'll link those things in the show notes. And yeah, thanks again for coming on Philosophy for Theology, man. I just really appreciate the time. Very grateful. And yeah, just thanks for all you guys are doing over there at ERI.
Max, it's been a blast. It's been a blast getting to kind of get to know you and reconnect with you.
Yes.
And I really appreciate all of that support and all of the wonderful work that you've done behind the scenes for the pro-life movement. I am more aware of that, I imagine, than your audience. And you are amazing and fantastic, and it is great to be on with you. So thanks so much. God bless.
Touche. Thank you, brother. God bless.